If you follow or know me at all, you've probably heard me talking about Duelists of Eden. I've been doing what I can to shill this game as much as possible, and for good reason. I have never played anything quite like it. It's a super unique hybrid of fighting game and card game inspired by Mega Man Battle Network. As cool as it is, it can be daunting at first to learn. It's very fast-paced, has a huge number of spells to choose from, and has quite a lot of mechanics and complicated scenarios to get acquainted with. In this video, I'm going to cover the basic mechanics, go over how to do combos, and explain some of the basics of deck building. Duelists of Eden battles take place on two side-by-side 4x4 grids, one for you and one for your opponent. You have free reign to move around your side as you please, but can't cross to your opponent's side without the help of certain spells. Your win condition is pretty straightforward. Reduce your opponent's health from 100 to 0. You do this by using your character's weapons and spells from your deck. Each character has 2 weapons unique to them, and you bring in a deck of 8 to 10 spells that you build before the battle. At the start of every battle, your deck order is randomized and you draw 2 spells into your hand, with the rest queued up and visible above them. You can shuffle on demand at any point to refresh your deck, and you automatically shuffle when you use your last card. Shuffling takes a couple seconds to do, and during it you lose your ability to use your spells. It starts out pretty quick, takes longer the more times you use it each battle. The vast majority of these spells and weapons cost mana to use. You can have a maximum of 6 mana in reserve, and you regenerate mana naturally over time. You gain mana faster the closer to the front column you are, and slower the farther back you are. On top of weapons and spells for offensive options, you have a few defensive options to use aside from just moving to avoid incoming attacks. Shield is the most straightforward of them. You simply hold your shield button to block attacks. Your shield decays slowly over time while it's up and takes the damage for you. The downside of this is you do not restore mana while holding your shield. Your shield has 12 health and can be broken if it takes too much damage. If it breaks, you take the leftover damage your shield couldn't block and enter an extended period of hit stun. Your shield slowly regenerates over time while not in use. You regenerate back to 6 shield after a shield break. Also tied to the shield button is your parry. You parry by dropping shield right before getting hit, similar to Smash Ult. Parry gives you a lot better frame advantage than regular shielding, and negates any shield damage you would have taken. Be careful though, because you can't effectively parry multi-hits. Our last defensive option is Spot Dodge. Spot Dodge spends 1 mana to give you some iframes, similar to how a Spot Dodge in Smash works. A successful Spot Dodge that avoids an attack has less recovery frames than a missed Spot Dodge. The last mechanic I want to cover here is lethal HP. When below 13 HP, landing attacks will regenerate some health, and you'll slowly regenerate health over time until you get back to 13. In Duelists, anytime you deal damage to your opponent with an attack, they are put in a state called hit stun, where they're entirely inactionable for 24 frames. This is the perfect chance for you to launch a follow-up attack and land a combo. Typically, you'll start with an easy-to-land card like a Line, Vortex, or a Step attack, and then chain it into spells that deal more damage. As a basic example, a line here puts your opponent 4 tiles in front of you when it lands, allowing it to combo into a wide variety of attacks like Minigun. As you grow more comfortable, you'll be able to string more and more attacks together in your combos. Experiment with using the starters I listed and see what combos you can find out of them. The deck builder is one of the most important parts of Duelists. Here, I'm going to go over a few key points you'll need to hit while building a deck, go over a couple extra tips just to make sure your deck is cohesive. First off, you're going to want to make sure you have a few cards you can consistently land in neutral that allow you to get your combos started. As I said previously, Align, Vortex, and Steps are all good options here, but anything you find yourself able to land consistently can work. You'll also want something to deal with structures. Objects that your opponents can place on the field, either as defense for them or as a hazard for you. Some solid, easy-to-use options for clearing them out are PushSlash and FireBreath. When in neutral, if you're trying to get your combos started, one of the most common things your opponent will do is camp in the back row to make themselves harder to hit, so you'll want an option to cover that as well. Steps are a good option to catch them, and so is Backstab. The last point you'll want to make sure to hit is having what's known as an off-angle spell. This means you'll want some way to hit your opponent without having to stand in the same row as them. A few good cards you can use for this are DiagBeam and Break Shot. Of course, just hitting all those marks doesn't necessarily make your deck good. There's still a couple other things to keep in mind. You'll want to make sure your deck isn't too mana hungry. If all your cards cost 2 or 3 mana, you're not going to be able to use them as frequently as you should. In most meta decks, the majority of your cards will be 0 or 1 mana, with a couple 2 to 3 mana cards in as your big damage options. You also want to make sure your deck can combo in some capacity. If you just pick a bunch of options that don't link into each other, you'll still maybe have a solid overall deck, but you'll fall behind in overall damage output. This will be something you get a feel for over time, and just landing your stray hits should work for now. As an example deck, we can use StepSlash, AutoSlash, PushSlash, FireBreath, Backstab, Align, DiagBeam, and Minigun. This deck isn't going to have any hard or heavy combos, but you'll still be able to get your damage out, and it should be pretty straightforward. As a combo starter, you'll use Align or StepSlash into AutoSlash, and then try to follow up with PushSlash, FireBreath, DiagBeam, or Minigun. If you use the steps, pretty much just pressing the next spell you want to use will work fine. But if you use Align, keep in mind it will place them 4 tiles away from you, so you'll need to use something that can actually reach them. I'll probably end up making a more comprehensive or advanced deck building guide in the future, but this should cover the basics for you. That should cover just about everything you'll need to know to get started with Duelists of Eden. It's a complicated game, and there's definitely some stuff I didn't cover here still, but it's enough to get into the game and start queuing up to play. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask us in the Duelists of Eden Discord, which I'll link in the description, along with the deck I built. This is my first real YouTube video, so I'm still figuring out the style everyone will like, so I'd appreciate any and all criticism in the comments. Let me know what you like and what you didn't, that way I can find a way to improve any future content. If you did find this helpful, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe, because I'll be making a lot more Duelist content going forwards. Thanks.